Hi, I'm Amanda Morrell with interest.co.nz, and I'm here today with a double-shot interview. I've got with me Ed Schuck. He is the former head of investments for Russell Investments, a global international firm that works in that space. Now you're an investment consultant based out of Auckland, and you advise institutional houses, financial houses on...
Yes, financial services houses,
Right.
wealth management businesses, and pension schemes, community trusts, that sort of thing.
Ed was just participating in a debate on whether superannuation should be made compulsory beyond New Zealand super in New Zealand, and you were taking the opposite view that no, it shouldn't be, and I understand that is your personal view as well. Why do you believe that superannuation should not be compulsory?
Well, I guess the point we were trying to make in the session today was that there's a degree of compulsory superannuation already in New Zealand. So I don't think anybody in the room really debated whether there should be additional savings by individuals. It's just that they should have the freedom of choice to decide what sort of thing they save for. There was a lot of, I think we were splitting hairs a little bit in there about is it a choice between products or a choice between sort of what you're saving for. And I think we all agreed, though, really, that individuals are saving for different things at different points in their life. Okay. And that's really where compulsion doesn't really help you.
Okay. There's still some debate about whether we do have a national savings crisis, indeed, and that whether people ought to be forced to save, or are they really going to have adequate savings in retirement? It would seem to be an individualistic thing. At the same time, there's all these consumer pressures to spend, and a lot of people lack the discipline to force some retirement savings. So what would you see as sort of a happy medium to get those people who might not otherwise save investing in their retirement futures?
Yeah, I think, again, another thing that sort of came out today was this notion that if you raise the literacy level of the population, that you just empower them to make good decisions about what they should save for. Again, I think most people agree that, at different times in your life, you're saving for different things. And in a way, when you save for one thing, you may actually be saving for your retirement at the end of the day anyway. We use the example of paying down the mortgage on your home. I mean, that's certainly a way of accumulating savings for the future. Quite a few people are doing it. Others would argue, yeah, but that means an awful lot of money is going into the housing market, and that's maybe not what we want, because that ends up causing difficulties for those who are trying to get into the housing market.
Right.
Prices have gone up, that sort of thing.
Yep. So there's all sorts of pressures that it opens up. I mean, at the end of the day, what should, in your opinion, an individual do to make the determination? Would it be better to pay off the mortgage, or perhaps force themselves, to take some good medicine by getting into KiwiSaver?
Well, I mean, I think there's a consensus view out there that KiwiSaver structured the way it is now is attractive. And so you're silly not to take advantage of the incentives. Mind you, those incentives have changed a little bit now, so it's not quite so strong a case for getting into KiwiSaver. But I mean, at the current level of commitment that you have to make to join KiwiSaver, it's actually not a bad way of getting exposed to superannuation saving. It's not actually a lot of money coming out of your salary. There are incentives to join, and it gets some people who otherwise might not have been thinking about retirement savings to actually start doing that. At the same time, though, I think the difficulty with compulsion is that there are lots of ways to save for the future, and as I said before, the point I think that really came through loud and clear today was this idea that you get professional advice, and financial literacy is about knowing what you're trying to do in life. Where am I in my life cycle? What have I got to save? What can I save? What do I want to do? And getting professional advice to help you decide how best to set some money aside for the future.
You've obviously traveled a lot. You've have the benefit of working in the US,
Yes.
And you seem familiar with what's going on across the pond in Australia. Where do you think New Zealand stand relative to that on the financial literacy scales?
Well, that's supposed to be fair, from what I can see. I mean, financial literacy, this basic financial literacy, which is just understanding things like the difference between a debit card and an ATM card, for example, or it's little everyday, I guess, financial aspects, which I think we could stand to gain. We could stand to improve in New Zealand. There's no doubt about that. And then there's a next layer, which is that if you're accumulating, if you're actually getting income, and you now can make a savings decision, how can I do that intelligently? I have to say, certainly in Australia and the US, because there's so many products available, and because balances in folks' retirement accounts are getting so large, the point that was made today is that that does command attention. When you got $20,000 sitting in the account, you start to think about, okay, how is that invested? And we haven't really reached that point yet in New Zealand, so we've got a bit of a job to do to get folks ready for that decision or that phase in their lives, I suppose.
Okay. With respect to the advice you're giving to a lot of outside firms, I guess you can't get into the specifics there, but that would be predominantly outside of KiwiSaver, I'm assuming.
It is, yes.
Yes. So supposing somebody had the $20,000 saved now and they're starting to take a greater interest in where they can achieve that savings. We heard today that the real risk of people outliving their savings. Are you going to eat your home in retirement where, we're be flooding? There's so much confusion and uncertainty in the economy today.
Yeah, well, there's not a bad thing. I mean, I think you find that if someone has invested heavily into a home that ultimately proves to be too big for them when they're retired, then they will trade out of it, trade into something smaller, or go traveling around the world or whatever. So I don't think by locking yourself into a big property asset is necessarily a bad thing. You can adjust that as you go along. I think there is some discussion around. You made the point about longevity and people living longer. I mean, that's definitely going to be the case. New Zealand's one of the very few countries. Well, I shouldn't say very few, but New Zealand is behind other countries in terms of grasping this nettle of raising the retirement age. And so, in fact, in Australia, they're paying older people to return to the workforce because they're leaving too early, and now all that wisdom leaves. Whereas people living longer means they can work later, and the country wants those people in the economy. So, in terms of decision making about how to save, I think the key thing is to recognize that there's usually a time frame. So the farther out you are from when you need the money, that dictates how much more equities exposure you can have.
Right.
And you really probably should expect, need a 20-year time horizon for equities to really have a dependable role in your portfolio. And so, I suppose that maybe goes on a little bit too long for that question.
No, well, I guess a lot of the tenets of modern investment theory are being challenged. I mean, this idea that you should have a greater weighting of equities given your certain age frame, but recent experience has kind of thrown a lot of that stuff out of the water, really. It's a confusing environment for people to be in. So is that all the more need for them to get solid financial advice?
Well, absolutely. And I think there's a tendency for folks to go into equities perhaps with higher expectations than they can actually deliver. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you look back over history, equities, you can only really count on equities outperforming your income assets over time frames on the order of 20 years. Really.
Yeah.
Whereas it's very common in the marketplace for folks to say, well, if you got a 10-year or a 15-year horizon, you should have some equities. Mm-hmm. But if you look back at all the 10-year periods that have ever been, there's an awful lot of them where it actually has not helped you to be in equities.
Right.
So if you have a longer horizon, it's good. If you're not, if you don't have that long horizon, then I'm a pretty conservative person myself, so I don't have a lot of equities on it.
Okay. All right, Schuck, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Amanda Morrell with Interest.co.nz, and this has been another one of our Double Shot interviews.